Alright, big question that I get asked a lot is why, especially a beginner's tank is spitting juice into their mouth. Most of the time it is going to be because your coil needs to be changed. Almost every single time, the reason that your atomizer is spitting juice into your mouth is because the coil is not getting hot enough to be able to vaporize all of the liquid. So while you're getting some vapor, you're also getting a decent amount of liquid spitting into your mouth too. You do want to change your coils about every week to 2 weeks, if you have, especially if you have a starter one. Even something like the Aspire Nautilus or something like that, you're going to want to change your coils about every week to 2 weeks. Obviously, it depends on how much you're using it. If you crank on it all the time, obviously you're going to need to replace it sooner than somebody who maybe only uses it when they're driving to and from work or something. Like for me, my Nautilus, or I'm sorry, my Atlantis tank coil, that one I need to replace roughly every 2 weeks because it is primarily when I'm driving that I'm using it. Really the only other time that I'll use my Atlantis is if the batteries for my other mods are all dead and the one in my Anarchist happens to be alive. So you're definitely going to want to make sure that you're keeping track of how long you've had your coil in your atomizer. If you are replacing it regularly and you're still finding that it's spitting into your mouth, it might simply be because the juice is too thin. Like I stated, the liquid juices and a lot of those other starter juices, the real base juice, those are going to be at a 50-50 blend, which is going to mean that they're really thin. You can still tank like a 60-40, maybe a 70-30 blend, depending on the atomizer that you have. And of course, that juice is going to be less likely to spit because it is thicker. So it's going to stick to your wick a little bit better. It's just going to wick like really nicely. It'll take longer to wick because it is thicker, but it's going to vape really nice for you. And of course, you're going to get a decent amount of flavor. Obviously, going into a higher VG, you're lowering that PG, which means your flavor carrier is dropping a little bit, but you're still going to have plenty of flavor for your juice. So you're not going to have to worry about having a really muted flavor just because you've got like a 70-30 blend for your juice. Me personally, I usually use either like a 70-30, maybe an 80-20 blend, and I still have a lot of flavor in my juice. Personally, I don't think I would ever vape a 50-50 anymore, just because, first off, I don't like a thin juice. Second, I think it almost might be too rich for a lot of the flavors that I prefer, because most of the time they're really strong flavors anyway. But going back to that, like I stated, if you are having problems with your atomizer spitting juice in your mouth, first, check to see how long you've had the coil in there. If you can't remember how long you've had it in there, it's probably time to change it. I do always recommend having an extra coil, especially for tanks like the Atlantis that are kind of hard to find replacement coils for them. When you go out and buy coils, buy at least 2, if not maybe more than that. The Atlantis coils do actually come in packs of 5, so most of the time, if you can afford it, I would recommend buying all 5 of them just so you have them just in case. If not, maybe you're running a little bit broke, maybe it's like 2 days before payday or something, you're just running low on cash, obviously just buy 1 or 2. You don't want to make yourself not be able to eat or get gas or something because you're trying to buy coils. But, simple answer, if your tank is spitting juice in your mouth, your atomizer is spitting juice, first, check to see how long you've had your coils in there. Second, check to see how thin your juice is. Plain and simple. Next question. Well, actually, I already hit one of the questions on there. The next one is going to be how often you should change your coil, which obviously, like I just said, about every week, 2 weeks, somewhere in there. Shouldn't be necessary to replace it more frequently than that unless you're like really, really cranking on that coil all the time. You might go through it in like 5 or 6 days. If you go through it that fast, though, I would recommend building your own, because it's going to get really expensive once you start replacing them that often. Vaping is supposed to be cheaper than smoking cigarettes. And primarily it is. It only is going to get more expensive if you let it and make it get more expensive. Some of the people like me, I like my fancy mods. I like the ones that are for aesthetic purposes and such. I have an authentic kryptonite, which is a monster. That thing's huge. It's actually a 26650 with an adapter for an 18650 battery, so I can use both. But it just looks really awesome. Some of you guys have seen it. For those of you who have not, you can just look at my Facebook. There's pictures of it all over Facebook. It's actually not with me right now, otherwise I would show it to you. But I like my fancy mods, so I do end up spending a lot more money on my product. I like my premium juices, so I do spend a little bit more on juices than some other people would. But it doesn't have to be expensive. When you get into rebuilding your coils, I mean, honestly, if you take care of your coils and you are dripping properly, you're not letting it get super dry, you're wicking properly, so you make sure you have a nice snug fit for the wick so you don't end up getting like a really dry coil and everything like that. As long as you're taking care of it, I mean, your coil can last you like a month, 2 months, maybe even longer, as long as you are taking care of it. People like me, I usually replace my coils like every week to 2 weeks anyway, just because I get bored of the build. But it is just simply because I'm bored of it. It isn't because I have to change it. Yeah, if you're buying coils, like you're getting those replaceables for your starter tanks and stuff like that, about every week to 2 weeks. Plain and simple. Next question. Okay, another big question. What's the difference between regulated mods and mechanical mods? A regulated mod is going to be something like the MVP. It's going to have a computer chip in it. Whether it uses the separate batteries like the 18650s, like this LG, for example. This is an 18650. Get a size comparison. It's roughly about the size of my thumb. So it is decently big. It's bigger than a AA. But whether you use something that uses those replaceable batteries or you have something where the thing just is the battery, the regulated mods are going to have a computer chip in them, which is basically going to control the power that the output from the battery to your atomizer. It's going to make sure that it's consistent, so it's always the same, rather than, for example, with a mechanical mod, like an Anarchist, or like my Kryptonite, like these box mods, whatever. If it's unregulated, it means that there is no computer chip, and basically the batteries are just going to drain and drain and drain, but you're going to notice a voltage drop. As the batteries start to wear down, you'll get less and less power. You're probably going to get less vapor. You're probably going to get a little bit less flavor. And you're just going to notice that it's not as strong of a hit. A lot of people do prefer the regulated mods, especially for just the regular day-to-day, whether you're going to work, whether they're hanging out at the house or something. A lot of people do prefer regulated mods. Personally, I don't like them. But that is a personal preference. I do prefer my regulated mods. Excuse me. Same reason that I don't like all the fancy stuff in my car. I do not have power locks. I don't have power windows or anything like that. Simply because I don't want there to be extra things that can break and go wrong. Same thing with my mod. I don't want to have to worry about the chip going bad. I don't want to have to worry about the chip frying if I happen to vent a battery or something. So I would rather just have it be connectors, atomizer with the battery there in the middle. Your mechanical mods like this are basically a glorified battery tube. I mean, it's basically what it is. You got a connector at the bottom, you got a connector at the top, and it's just going to complete the circuit. A lot of people don't know that your hand is actually going to be the ground for these mechanical mods. It's not supposed to freak you out. It does to a lot of people. But the tube, with your hand holding it, you are the ground. Let this sink in for a minute. That's why you don't have like a ground wire or something. You got the negative post, you got the positive post on top. And then your hand is going to be the ground for this. So when you vape it, you get a full circuit no problem. But that's going to be the big difference between regulated and mechanical mods. Once again, like this box, for example, you got the connectors at the bottom, and you got the connectors at the top, and then there's some wires that go up. You got the button here for my switch, and then you got the wires going up to the 510 for the connection for the atomizer. So that's going to be how that one works. It's real simple, no computer chips or anything like that, nothing that can get fried short of the wires themselves if I happen to build my atomizer super stupid low and then fry it. Moving on to my next question that I did just remember, I have a lot of people that ask me how low is too low when they are starting to build. Now this of course is getting into a rebuildable atomizer like the drip tips and stuff like that. I'm going to be very frank, there are no batteries to this day that are safe to build anything lower than a 0.1, 0.12, something like that. Now, of course, I have a lot of friends that I'm not going to hate on that do build super stupid low, like 0.05 or something like that. But they understand the risks. They understand the problems that they're going to run into because of the fact that they're building so low. Basically, what happens when you start building that low is that you start running the risks of venting your battery. Basically what that means is that the battery itself, like I stated, is not designed for resistance that low. So what can happen is that basically the battery undergoes a catastrophic failure, and you can explode the top, explode the bottom out, battery acid all over the place, and of course most of the time it's in your mod, which means all that is getting inside of your mod, and it can very easily damage, if not destroy, the inside of your mod. Now, most times, the failure is not going to be bad enough that it's going to literally blow apart your mod. I mean, you're talking about a battery tube that's made out of stainless steel, brass, copper, or something like that. Obviously, the copper is probably the most likely to actually blow apart just because it is a softer metal. But overall, they are made out of metal. I mean, you're not talking about a tube that's made out of, like, acrylic or anything like that. It's not going to be some kind of like plastic plumber's tube or something like that you're going to have to worry about it blowing apart at this first sense of like, well, pressure pretty much from an explosion or something. But you are still going to create some serious damage to your mod, especially the battery. I mean, the battery is just going to be done. You're not going to be able to do anything with it. It's going to be straight into the trash or your recycling bin. But personally, I do not ever build anything lower than a 0.1 just because I like my face and my hands intact like they are. I game, so I would prefer to be able to have all 10 of my fingers. I would probably not be able to get used to gaming without them. However, of course, there's a lot of people out there that are the risk takers. I'm just not one of them in that sense. But as a beginner, like I stated before, if you decide to get into rebuildables, I'm going to recommend going with some 26 gauge once again. It's somewhat thin wire, but it's not going to be crazy thin like a 28 gauge or a 30 gauge. So it's going to be a good middle ground for you to start with. Like I said, it's going to get you're going to ohm out roughly at about a 0.4, 0.5 ohm. So it's going to be a good middle ground for you to get yourself started on. Get used to the heat from the atomizer, and you're just going to get a chance to really test the waters, see how you feel about it. If you decide that you really like it, awesome. My personal go-to is 24 gauge 5-wrap dual coils. I just like the flavor, I like the vapor that I get out of it. It's good middle ground for me personally. Usually ohms out at about 0.16, 0.18. The current build that I have in my box right now is a 0.22, like I stated earlier. So I'm getting a lot of flavor, getting plenty of vapor, especially for my own everyday use. If I'm doing a competition build, obviously I'm going to go a little bit more hardcore with it. Pretty much get like 0.1 on the dot. Like I had a quad coil that I built before. A lot of you guys got a chance to see and vape on. That of course was a 0.1 on the nose, It's really hot, creating stupid amounts of vapor. It was also cranking through my juice like it was his job, though. So that was part of the reason I took them out, because I just can't afford having to be going through 30 ml bottles like every couple of days. It's just ridiculous. That's part of the reason I built this one a little bit higher, because I wanted to be able to actually have a bottle of juice for a little longer. It gets expensive to be going through that much juice that fast. Let's go back to these questions here.